I'm going to go ahead and get us started. Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Coalition on Homelessness December membership meeting, our state legislative preview meeting. My name is Jason Austin. I'm the membership organizer here on staff. I see a lot of familiar faces in the audience, a lot of familiar faces, pets and children who are also very welcome here. For those of you who might be joining us for the first time this morning, the Coalition on Homelessness hosts monthly membership meetings on the third Thursday of every month from 9 a.m. to 10:30 a.m. to share resources, provide advocacy opportunities to the community, and build power and solidarity as a movement. Our program today is going to be an overview of what to expect out of the legislative session in Olympia starting in January. Our meeting business will run from 9 a.m. to 10:30 a.m. We hope you will be able to stay on this meeting until 11 because from 10:30 to 11, we will be featuring a special guest musical performance from Seattle folk musician Reggie Garrett. We hope you'll be able to see that. And with that, I think I'm going to throw things over to our Executive Director, Allison Eisinger, to read our mission statement and to give us the lay of the land.
Wow. I didn't know I get to read our mission statement. Do we have a volunteer who might like to read the coalition's mission statement, which is helpfully located at the bottom of the slide that Sasha's sharing? And you are allowed to unmute yourself, Sanita.
Oh, thank you.
Hello, thank you.
I was going to say, we mobilize our community to challenge systemic causes of homelessness and advocate for housing justice.
Thank you so much. Well, there are more people than we can actually have introduce themselves on this call, which is, of course, a positive thing. But I just want to reiterate Jason's welcoming remark that we do invite everyone to share your camera if you feel comfortable doing so. We know everybody has Zoom fatigue. We feel it too. And for us, we really appreciate and welcome the opportunity to see each other's faces, even if it's just for a portion of the meeting, because it reminds us of the wonderful range of folks we are all connected to via a distance right now, but someday back in person. And I want to thank you all for joining us. Of course, this is the last coalition membership meeting of the year, but lucky for us, we meet every month. So we are taking some time to prepare, as we do each December, for what happens in January, namely our state legislative session. The state legislative session starts on January 11th, which is a Monday, and it is scheduled to run through Sunday, April 25th. It is, of course, possible that an extension or a special session will happen. We have no way of knowing that now. What we do know is that, like everything else in this time of COVID, there is going to be everything different and a lot unexpected. So we're doing what, as advocates, service providers, activists, people who have personal experience of homelessness, housing instability, know how to do, which is to be adaptive. And we're preparing as we can for the issues that we know are going to be before the state legislature, always progressive, adequate revenue, always no cuts, and always deeper investments in the housing that is the solution to homelessness and the supports that people need to live their lives in dignity. And there are also some incredible opportunities, despite what we know will be a session that will probably be very frustrating in some respects, both for the lawmakers and for us, and that will probably not result in passage of as many pieces of legislation as a quote unquote normal session would. But we have Roxana Gomez here as part of the Voting Rights Restoration Coalition, a coalition that we're proud to be part of that has done some incredible work in the interim. And we feel like this is the year to expand and restore voting rights to some 10,000 people. So you'll be hearing more about that. You'll be hearing from our wonderful statewide advocacy partners at the Washington Low Income Housing Alliance. We're so grateful to John Stovall, whom you'll hear from later, and also from our wonderful statewide advocacy partners at Poverty Action, and Omar Cuevas Vega is going to be joining us. This is high level. We're not getting deep into the weeds of the policy priorities. In part, that's because there isn't time to do that justice right now. And in part, it's because we know that some people are joining this conversation at different points. We have people on this call who are professional lobbyists and who know the ins and outs of Olympia way better than any of us on the coalition staff do. We have people who might not have ever contacted their elected lawmakers in the state capitol yet, but believe me, you will very shortly. And so we want to give everyone a bit of a start together, and also make sure that we feel the collective power and strength and range of our coalition. We know that people who do work in King County may live in Snohomish, Pierce, Kitsap counties, sometimes even further afield than that. We know that there are folks here who don't have regular internet access, or who are working with people whose voices must be heard in Olympia and who don't have cell phones or computer access. And part of what we are pledging to you is that we're going to engage with you in figuring out how to help inform, engage, and mobilize the folks you work with, for whom getting on a Zoom call is not perhaps an easy option, but whose voices absolutely still need to inform the policy decisions and budget decisions that are coming up before us in Olympia. So I think that's most of the overview that I was planning to share. Saleena has a cool interactive option that she is going to share with us. I will just note, as people continue to join us, that our meeting is scheduled for, as Jason said, our business portion of our meeting. We've shortened to 9 to 10:30, recognizing that 2 hours on Zoom is a lot. And we have a really beautiful member appreciation concert, thanks to the wonderful Reggie Garrett, who's off walking his dog right now. But this is also part of our commitment to you who are direct service providers in housing and homeless services, in healthcare, who are driving buses, and otherwise essential workers who are keeping our community going now. We know that people's hearts are heavy. This has been a long damn 10 months, and it's a long, dark, cold, wet winter out there. And this is not an easy time for anyone. Music, art, poetry, movement, solidarity in all its forms are essential to our well-being and to the well-being of our community network. So we're deeply grateful to Reggie for joining us 10:30 to 11. We hope you'll be able to stay or just have his beautiful music on as you go back to doing other parts of your work. And we'll tell you how you can support him as well. We are paying Reggie. And I'm going to now hand off to Saleena to do some cool things.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Saleena Salongo. My pronouns are she, her, or they, them. I'm the advocacy coordinator here with the Coalition on Homelessness. This is my 3rd month, so really happy to have gotten to know a lot of you, and I'm really looking forward to getting to know more of you as the months go on. Sasha, could you go to the next slide, please? Thank you. So I just wanted to recognize that this is, again, going over the state legislative session that is coming up. And I want to recognize that people are at different levels of knowledge. So I just wanted to quickly review for people, maybe this is an introduction and maybe this is a little bit of a refresher for you, but I just wanted to review the Find My District tool on the Washington State Legislature site. And I wanted to also recognize that for people experiencing homelessness who might not have a traditional residential address, they can actually still use this tool to figure out who represents them and what their legislative district is. So it looks like most of you have already renamed yourselves with your legislative district. If you haven't yet, I'm going to encourage you to go to this little website here. Jason, if you could drop that into the chat one more time, that would be great. Oh, it looks like you already have. If you could go there and then enter your home address, I'll show you what it looks like. Sasha, could you go to the next slide? Yeah, so you'll want to enter your home address into this tool. I've put in an example of if you don't have a traditional residential address, you're welcome to use a mailing address or the address of a shelter or park that you frequent. You can also put in an intersection or cross street. So that's what I've done here. You just have to make sure that the zip code for that area is accurate. And then make sure that district type is set to legislative. Once that is done, it'll take you to a map of that area and it'll show you a little blurb with a district number and then the legislators. And if you click on the legislators, you can get more information about them, including what committees they're on, which is always useful information to have, as well as how to contact them, what bills they've sponsored, and how they've voted on previous pieces of legislation. All right, Sasha, could you go to the next slide? Yeah, so I just wanted to wake everyone up, encourage you to be a little interactive. If you are in Zoom, you should be seeing this slide. This is the King County Legislative District map. If you hover, you should see a little green bar. Usually it's at the top of Zoom. It should say you are viewing Sasha's screen. If you click on view options and then annotate, you should have a little toolbar that shows up. If you hover over stamp, please use the heart or star stamp to indicate which legislative district you are from. So, and then if you are from a legislative district outside of King County, you can also use the text tool and then write in this little green box in the bottom right corner what legislative district you're part of. It would be really cool to see that information as well if you wanted to, if you feel comfortable sharing.
This is one example of something, if you've been to one of our legislative previews before, you might have been invited by Jason or Hillary or Sasha or Barb to do this on an actual physical map. But in some ways, this is way better because Saleena told us she can save a screenshot of this and we can maybe just keep building on this as the session goes on. It's always really great to see the coverage that we get.
I'll give everyone another minute or so to do so. And then if you want to use the reactions at the bottom to indicate that you're done, or you can use like the, in the participants tab, sometimes you can use a little hand raise. I'm stuck in annotate right now. There we go. If you want to use the little thumbs up reaction just to let me know that you've done so, that'd be great. Yeah, and feel free to steal this. I think that this is an excellent feature and makes Zoom a little bit more interactive and a little bit more personal. So feel free to steal that for this idea for future meetings. All right. Well, I'm just going to save a little bit of a screenshot of this map. I think it's really interesting to see the diversity and where people are coming from. And yeah, just to see the map filled in. So.
And maybe we can come back to this at the end of the meeting in case there are folks who join us later on and we can enhance our beautiful sticker art.
All right.
Wonderful. Saleena, I realized there's one thing that I meant to mention, so maybe just if you can find the right time before you start introducing our guests.
Yeah. I'm sorry, did you want to?
Yes, that would be great. Thank you. Sorry, I just realized there is a really important piece of information that I want to share at the beginning as well as at the end of the meeting, knowing that people are sometimes joining and having to go off to other things. We, of course, as many of you know, at the Coalition on Homelessness, had the great honor and privilege for 37 years of organizing our community's one night count, as we all called it, of people experiencing homelessness outside in King County. Many of you worked to make that a tremendous community-owned project, and many of you have continued to lend your expertise and knowledge and time to the renamed Count Us In point-in-time count for King County. It is something that is required for HUD funding, happens in communities all across the United States at the end of January, and involves not only counting people who are without shelter outside, but people in shelters and transitional housing programs. We've received lots and lots of inquiries from our members about what is going on for the 2021 point-in-time count. And what I want to share with all of you is that, as you might imagine, this is not the year and not the time to bring hundreds and hundreds of volunteers together to do that sort of activity. And in fact, King County has been awarded a waiver and will not be conducting an unsheltered point-in-time count in 2021. So the counts of people who are in shelter and transitional housing will, of course, happen. And you'll be hearing from King County folks about that. But I wanted to make sure that everybody knew that because of the number of questions and inquiries that we've been getting. I will say that as a veteran of doing this work as a way of bearing witness to the realities for people without homes or shelter, who number some 6,000 or 7,000 at least across King County, it is hard to imagine that as a community, we are not in some way going to recognize and honor as best we can the imperative that they show us that we have to do a really damn good job during this upcoming legislative session. So stay tuned. We welcome your thoughts about what a COVID appropriate, respectful, realistic process might be for engaging folks without shelter to lift their voices up. And that is, of course, part of the theme of all of our work all the time. So look forward to hearing from you. Feel free to email me or send me a chat. And now back to Saleena. Thanks for letting me do that piece that I forgot to do.
Thank you, Allison. Yeah, so the next part is just opening up to hear from some of our statewide advocacy partners. You'll be hearing about key legislative items for this upcoming session. First, you'll be hearing from Roxana Gomez, who is with the ACLU of Washington and a huge part of the Washington Voting Rights Restoration Coalition. If there are any other members from the Voting Rights Restoration Coalition, please raise your hand or use the reactions to give a thumbs up or a wave, and feel free to just connect with us. We'd love to hear from you. And then the next person we'll be hearing from is John Stovall with the Washington Low Income Housing Alliance, who will sort of discuss the environment of the upcoming legislative session, as well as some key items regarding tenant and eviction protections, as well as funding. And then lastly, we'll be hearing from Omar Cuevas Vega from the Statewide Poverty Action Network, talking about public benefits. All right, Roxana, take it away.
Thank you, Saleena, and thank you, Allison. Thank you for creating this space for me and the Voting Rights Restoration Coalition to share our top priority. And thanks for the tip on how to annotate on Zoom. I learn something new every day. So that's something that I will carry forward with me at my next meeting. But I'm here to talk about voting rights restoration. This if in case you all want to look at the bill, I'm going to drop it in the chat. This is last year's bill number, Senate Bill 6228. Last session, we had, and I don't know if you all are familiar with just this floor debate and how it went down, but voting rights restoration, this bill is centered around restoring voting rights of people the day they leave prison. Currently in the state of Washington, you have to complete your community custody period, which some people are in community custody indefinitely and will never get their voting rights back. But we believe that the restoring people's voting rights the day they leave prison is a good move, not only to reintegrate people back into society a little smoother, but also for administration purposes. We've heard from county auditors, election administrators, that it's really hard to track individual community custody periods. So this is not only going to be easier for members reintegrating back into the community and feel like they have a stake in their community, political accountability. We've heard those words from some directly impacted people, but it's just going to make things much easier for people who administer our elections. So last legislative session, this bill, we had one vehicle in the Senate. Senator Kuderer was our sponsor. It made it all the way down to the floor. And unfortunately, and this very rarely happens, but the bill was pulled before there was a final vote. It was a 5 o'clock bill on the policy committee cutoff. And it was really heartbreaking to see this bill just die on the floor when we had a coalition of directly impacted people leading this charge. I think we've learned a lot since last session, and throughout this interim, the coalition has been meeting consistently. I know that the Seattle-King County Homelessness Coalition has been also joining us. So they've been a great voice. But this upcoming session, we're prepared to take it all the way. And I think one thing that's really different this upcoming legislative session is that we have a champion that actually knows what it's like to have her voting rights taken away. And that's Representative-elect Tara Simmons. She is going to be our sponsor in the House, and she's very excited. She's stated in many spaces that this is going to be her #1 priority, and she's most definitely made it her #1 priority. Every time we meet with her, she's excited to share and report that she's been telling her colleagues that this is something that needs to pass in 2021. So that's really exciting. I think another thing that's different this upcoming legislative session is that we've done a lot of outreach to organizations and communities that were sort of pitted against us last legislative session. If you all maybe saw the floor debate, there were a lot of negative comments around the survivor community, that this bill would be sort of disrespectful to survivors. When in reality, I don't think we can separate the survivor community and people who are formerly incarcerated. In a lot of instances, they're the same community. It's this cycle that we see repeating. And Representative-elect Tara Simmons has mentioned this herself. She's a survivor, and she has also experienced incarceration. So I think over the interim, we've done a good job of developing communication materials, and we will be happy to share those with you all so that you all can feel comfortable sharing and speaking to your legislators on behalf of this issue. So yesterday we had a really productive meeting with the King County Sexual Assault and Resource Center and the Washington State Coalition Against Domestic Violence, and both of them have endorsed this policy. They will be supporting us to show that the survivor community is for this bill. And we're always looking for more support. We want to make this an intersectional issue. And I think we all know that reentry and reintegration touches so many different areas. How can we really expect people to reintegrate into society after they leave prison if we continue to place barrier after barrier after barrier in front of them? we don't just see this with voting rights restoration. We see this with housing discrimination. We see this with workplace discrimination, and we pretend that it doesn't happen, but it actually does. So, so we believe that voting rights restoration will help people reintegrate into society better. It will reduce the offenses, the chances of reoffending and recidivism. And we just believe that it's a good call for the community. When everybody feels like they have a stake in their community, we're all safer, we're all more involved. And I mean, what more do we want? So I'll just pause there, see if anyone has questions, or are we taking any questions right now? Actually, I did also want to drop in the chat the link to our website. We have put together a website that very short, but I think it has everything that you need to know. We're in the process of, you know, adding more things to it. We want to create an action center. So we'll let you know when that's been updated, but it'll be a great tool to just email your legislators directly from this website, so that, you know, everyone can have this on their radar. So I'll pause there.
Hi, Roxana. Thank you so much for presenting. I just, for people who either themselves have experienced incarceration or work with people who have experienced incarceration, is there a way that they can connect with the Washington Voting Rights Restoration Coalition to help share their story or advocate? I remember that there was a survey a couple months back. I'm not sure if that is still open and collecting stories.
Yes, thank you. I conveniently have it open, but yeah, we do have a survey, a questionnaire that we put together. We want directly impacted people to be a part of this coalition every step of the way. And just because of scheduling, I was the one who was able to come today, but you know, we have a team of directly impacted people who have been leading this policy. But if you know somebody who would like to get involved, please share with them this link. We are using the survey to collect information on, you know, whether or not they would be willing to engage in legislator meetings, if they would be willing to share their story. And we're actually hoping to create some more like visual and audio dynamic graphics that we can share on social media and do social media toolkits for people to share. So there's a lot in the works, and we would love for directly impacted people to be to continue to be a part of this work. Yeah, Allison.
Thanks, Roxana. I wanted to ask you if I got it right, that the estimate is about 10,000 people in Washington would be affected and have their voting rights restored if this legislation passes.
That's correct. Yeah, those are the estimates that we have, which is not insignificant. That's it.
It is not insignificant. And I venture to say that many of those 10,000 people are connected here in King County, and folks on this call know them, work with them, and should be reaching out and spreading the word about this, because there is no more powerful thing than I can imagine than for this state to follow the practice of other states and have the folks who are directly affected help change the law. We know that in 2008, when the state legislature changed the law to restore voting rights partially, that many thousands of people never knew that that law changed. And this is a different campaign. And part of what I think is so powerful about it is that when this law changes, people are going to know it. So we really invite everyone on this call to think about, how do the people you know who could be part of this winning campaign get connected?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you for mentioning that. I don't know if you all know, but in California, California just recently passed Prop 17, which restored the voting rights of more than 50,000 people on parole. So there is a movement across this country to undo these relics of Jim Crow. I mean, I would be remiss if I didn't mention the racial justice component of this bill. I think we all have at some point have heard that, you know, the Black vote was disenfranchised on purpose. And this has continued to persist in our society today when we have these sort of exceptions of who is able to vote and who is not able to vote, incarceration being that limiting factor. So we know that this is going to be a multi-year approach. If we get this through the finish line, which we absolutely want to, it's going to be a lot more effort after this battle is won to ensure that we are educating people and take that action to have them register to vote. Because as Allison mentioned, some people, when they left prison, were told that they would never be able to vote again. So we want to reach people all over the state to know that they have this opportunity and they have their right to vote back.
I think we have time for one more question, and I see that Gina has her hand raised. If you want to unmute yourself and ask your question, you're totally welcome to.
Am I unmuted now? Oh, cool. I actually want to respond to Roxana because I work with, and I'm on one of the boards at Washington Community Action Network. And we're doing a lot of work right now around the incarceration of people and COVID. One of the specific things is we are asking lawmakers to release people who have been incarcerated since before 1984 and they're 70 and 80 years old or older because of the effects of COVID, and we want to make sure we're protecting them. So my question to you, Roxana, is how can I link up with you to try and merge our two directions of work?
Absolutely. Yeah, I would be happy to connect. I'm going to drop my email in the chat. So please feel free to just email me and we can talk more offline about how to intersect those issues. I mean, we can't talk about voting rights restoration without talking about decarceration. And in an especially critical moment like this, we have to be urging more people to take that approach. So yeah, I would welcome that opportunity. Please reach out to me.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Roxana. If you have any other questions for the Washington Voting Rights Restoration Coalition or Roxana, feel free to email them to me. I can drop my email. You can also message us in the chat box, and we'll follow up with an email and get your questions answered. I think next we're going to go to hear from John Stovall from the Washington Low Income Housing Alliance to talk about some of their legislative priorities, as well as their insight into the upcoming legislative session environment. So John, you should be able to share your screen, but let me know if you have any issues with that.
Thank you, Saleena. All right. Can folks see my screen right now? Cool. Awesome. Yeah, thank you, Roxana, for all the work that y'all are doing on voting rights restoration. It's super exciting to hear and follow and support that work. Yeah, so I'm John Stovall. I'm the member organizer at the Washington Low Income Housing Alliance. We work on statewide policy around affordable housing and homelessness, and very, in the last several years, that has also centered a lot of work around tenant protection issues as well. So I'm just going to go through some of our lead priority items this year. And all of these are deeply informed by folks like yourselves that we talked with throughout the interim. So basically, like from, let's say, the beginning of June through kind of the end of September, the Housing Alliance spent a lot of time reaching out to communities all over Washington state, including, I'm pretty sure, every single homeless coalition, and quite a few different organizations and grassroots groups that are that are organizing in their communities, particularly around housing and homelessness. And so we asked questions like, what are the top line most urgent issues specifically related to housing and homelessness in your community? What are some of the issues that are particularly prevalent regarding racial equity or racial justice in your community that also may have an overlap around housing and homelessness? And we asked several other questions similar to that, sort of like what makes it most difficult for people to get out of homelessness? What are some of the biggest risks that people face in terms of facing homelessness? And what are the barriers to being able to get into and secure and maintain affordable housing long term? So our whole process kind of started with that and resulted in these 4 top lead agenda items, as well as an additional like 6 or so also lead agenda items. But these 4 are kind of our like, we're really honing in on these, and the other ones are also very important as well. So in terms of what we are pushing for this year, there's kind of some buckets here. You'll sort of notice a trend. Like, we of course always are dedicated to increasing funds and increasing resources for new affordable housing, and also to preserve existing affordable housing. I think we're all pretty much aware at this point that Washington has a severe, and King County in particular, has a very severe shortage of affordable housing, particularly for people earning, less than 30% of the area median income, people who are on fixed incomes, for example, people who are just at extremely low incomes and are, and for whom it's impossible to find a place to live on the private rental market. So that's exactly why we have the Housing Trust Fund at the state level. The trust fund is essentially our state's primary way of funding affordable housing for those with the lowest incomes. And so when we think about like permanent supportive housing or other affordable housing projects that many of the kind of nonprofits and housing authorities in King County build and maintain, many of those homes and those buildings are funded by the Housing Trust Fund, along with other sources like King County and Seattle Office of Housing funds as well. But in terms of the need, even our request this year, which is significant, which is a request of $250 million to be invested into the capital budget, at the state capital budget, and then to be invested into the Housing Trust Fund, even that $250 million, it won't get us there to the actual need. But it is I will say, it is a stretch. It is an ambitious ask because we haven't really asked for this much money before. Last year, we were able to secure the most funding in the previous biennium that we've ever been able to, over $200 million. And so that's why we see it being a feasible political opportunity for us to be able to ask for more this year. So what we're asking for is $240 million for the Housing Trust Fund, which will build new units, over 6,000 homes across Washington state, which will all be required to be affordable to people making at the most 80% of the area median income. But primarily it's going to be for folks earning 30% or maybe up to 50% of the area median income. And then, so that is one piece of the ask around affordable housing. And the other piece is an additional $10 million to be able to preserve existing affordable housing for folks all over the state. But one thing that we know is happening, and there's a website called the National Preservation Database, which shows affordable housing projects all over the country, but you can look in Washington state specifically. It shows use restrictions, meaning like affordability requirements that are expiring on those properties. And so this was an issue last year that the Housing Alliance was able to secure funding for as well, to help preserve those affordable housing homes from being lost, from having their affordability requirements lost, and then the rents going to, skyrocketing to private market rents. And so we were able to secure $10 million for that last year to preserve many USDA, which is the Department of Agriculture, which actually builds affordable housing. So we're able to preserve like several buildings around the state and used all of that $10 million, but we weren't able to meet the entire need. So we're requesting an additional $10 million to continue to meet those needs and ensure that we don't have, buildings, especially in rural areas, where the rents are set at 30% of a person's income, and it's potentially the only affordable option for someone who's on a fixed income, so that we don't have those rents skyrocketing and entire buildings full of people who are, seniors and people with disabilities being displaced. So that's a really, really important piece of this puzzle. And so that preservation and the increase of affordable housing is going to be one of our top line asks this year. And I would be remiss if I didn't kind of make the connection between all of the challenges that people are facing this year, being able to, afford rent and be able to stay in their homes. If there wasn't a connection made between that and the rising rents, throughout our state over the last decade or so, we'd be missing something really key there, because our private market rents have increased so much that for the average person, your rent burden is increasing steadily over that time, because incomes are obviously not increasing at the same rate as rent. And so the more your rent increases, the more tight your budget gets, right? And so when the tighter your budget, the more susceptible you are to any loss of income, like during COVID, for example. Even if you've had your hours reduced just by 5 hours a week or something like that, or 6 hours a week, that can be the thing that causes you to fall behind on rent. And so that's kind of the next two pieces here. Is we are really invested in keeping people in their homes, and we have been all year long. The Housing Alliance has been very focused on, urging our governor to create the eviction moratorium that we currently have, and to extend it several times throughout this year. And of course, the eviction moratorium is set to expire December 31st. Governor Inslee hasn't made an announcement quite yet on whether he's going to extend it. We are really hopeful that he will, and we've been pushing very hard. We've had action alerts out for basically the last month on this, and many of you have taken action, so thank you. But we know that even if the governor extends the eviction moratorium from December 31st to March 31st, which is what we're asking for, there still is the matter of like a long-term recovery and the long-term sort of challenges that renters are facing. People are not just automatically become, caught up on rent, or not everybody's going to be fully employed again at the levels that they were at and earning the amount of money that they were making before that. And their debt to their landlord is not going to just go away on March 31st. So we have to have a long-term set of tenant protections in place to ensure that people's tenancies are preserved long-term. And one of the really, really key pieces of this is just cause protections. And if you're not familiar with just cause protections, essentially Washington does not have those. Seattle does, and several other smaller cities do in King County. But just cause is essentially requiring a reason for a landlord to kick a tenant out of their home. And so if you're a month-to-month renter, or if your lease is expiring, then you can be just given a 20-day notice to vacate. And so we are requiring that just cause be included in those, as well as other extensions of the eviction moratorium. And Allison and everybody, I understand I'm running behind, so I'm going to wrap up.
I'm so sorry. I just want to say we are fortunate enough to have Senator Kuderer joining us after you get off the call. So I'm wondering if we can imagine that we'll ask Senator Kuderer to go a little more in depth into some of the tenant protections, and make sure that you have time to talk about this very important final bullet, as well as just a little quick bit of your insight for folks to understand what an all virtual advocacy environment might look like.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
Thanks. And so I'll just quickly mention, in addition to these tenant protections, we will be asking for an increase to the document recording fee by $100, which is going to be our funding source for rental assistance to actually pay off people's debt to landlords and pay off their arrears. So I'll just quickly mention that. And then that final bullet point that Allison was mentioning is really, really important. So she mentioned at the beginning, the coalition is all about, increasing resources for affordable housing and homelessness and preventing cuts. And we're in this really kind of precarious budget environment this year where there's a deficit. And what tends to happen sometimes is during a budget deficit, lawmakers get very focused on balancing the budget, which they're constitutionally required to do. So that makes sense. And there's kind of two strategies you can go with. You can either cut discretionary funds and cut funds to those programs, or you can increase revenue to balance the budget. We are obviously, all of us, I assume, are very opposed to cutting funding to what would be considered probably the most vulnerable programs to cuts, which is like affordable housing, homelessness, human services programs that are not statutorily required to be funded. They're sort of discretionary, and every single biennium they have to be requested to have funding for. So instead, we are fighting along with, there's actually several coalitions out there that are pushing this conversation this year on progressive revenue, meaning we, instead of our state relying on sales tax and property tax to primarily fund its operations, our state needs to be relying on something that actually taxes the incredible amount of wealth that we have in Washington state that is currently not being taxed, and it's being hoarded, frankly. And so that funding exists. Our state is very well resourced. We just have to tap into it to adequately fund our people in the state so that they can have a just recovery. Boop, 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 boop. And these are some other ones. I'll just quickly mention the banning discrimination against renters based on a prior criminal record. This is something that Roxana touched on a little bit around housing discrimination, which still exists. We are working to, there was a bill introduced last year and we're hoping it will be reintroduced again this year, but we have also kind of been working in coalition with a lot of organizations, including the ACLU and others, to continue that fight. And I probably don't have enough time to go into these, but I will put my contact info into the chat so that anybody can follow up with me on these. So I'll also put some links into the chat on how you can get connected to advocacy with the Housing Alliance's legislative agenda. I'll put this link here. It's a way for you to just sort of sign up for any and all advocacy opportunities with us, including Housing and Homelessness Advocacy Days, which is going to be all virtual this year, and it's going to be a week long, and registration starts for on January 4th. So stay tuned for that registration link, and I'm sure all of you will hopefully get all of our emails that we're sending out about that. And this also is a link to our storytelling forum. So, hearkening back to what was mentioned earlier around really centering the voices of those who have been directly impacted by all of these policies and all of these issues. We want to work with you if you have a particular story around falling behind on rent, or if you have participated in the Housing and Essential Needs program and you're worried about the idea of budget cuts to the state, or if you have been able to access affordable housing and you want to share how important that is so that we can build 6,000 more units around Washington state. We would love to connect with you, and we have staff to work with you one-on-one to kind of practice testifying and crafting your story. So I'll put that link in the chat as well. And just real quick, so like Allison said, we are, it looks different this year. We're not going to be in Olympia pretty much at all. It's all going to be online. And so we're going to need to get kind of used to using Zoom and or finding accessible ways to work around that for folks for whom Zoom is not a very easily accessible platform. It does sound like for all hearings and all sort of like official business, it will all be conducted via Zoom. So for like a budget hearing or a committee hearing where you might be testifying, you will be required to use Zoom. You will be required to probably, it sounds like, have your camera on as well. So there won't be the option to call in. So this is where accessibility will be key. For any of you who work at an organization that has technology that can be shared in whatever way it is, like if you have a computer room that is still open and still accessible in a safe way to folks, that will be a really key resource. I understand probably a lot of those are closed, but if that's not the case, then please think about how you can share those resources. Or if you have extra laptops, or if you have extra phones and or hotspots for Wi-Fi that you can share with people who don't have those things already. That will be really, really key in terms of making the testifying experience, the testimony experience, accessible to everybody. Another thing I want to mention around accessibility is if you are working with someone, or if you yourself need to utilize interpretation, we are not totally sure how the legislature is going to handle interpretation. And so we want to know ahead of time so that we can work with you to, or maybe the coalition or all of us can kind of like collaborate together to identify an interpreter who can work with you to be able to speak, during your, share your story in testimony in the language that you feel comfortable speaking in. The other kind of big piece of this is lawmaker meetings. Like we're not just going to be living in the testimony and official legislative environment. There will be many different sort of like one-on-one lawmaker meetings, and Housing and Homelessness Advocacy Day is going to be full of lawmaker meetings. And so we need to be kind of, thinking about how we can make those interesting and creative, and how we can use like virtual backgrounds and other things to sort of drive our advocacy messages in those meetings. And then I think ledge.wa.gov has already been mentioned as a crucial resource. I would just underline that. It is a great way to sort of track bill progress and learn more about your lawmakers.
Okay, John, thank you so much. We really want to make sure to give Omar a few minutes because of the importance of the basic needs and policy issues that the Poverty Action folks are leading on. There's so much more to say about this, but fortunately, this isn't the last opportunity we have to talk with people about how to engage in a meaningful way. At the coalition, we are already thinking about this. We are planning our Homelessness Advocacy 101 workshops with a version specifically for homeless service providers and housing providers. And we're probably going to make them not 2-hour meetings, but more like 30-minute sessions that you can fit into your lunch hour and invite other folks to join. So John, thank you so much. We will continue to tap your knowledge and experience and the Housing Alliance's capacity to help people prep for things like testimony. And we're going to continue to find ways to do our virtual postcards and other ways that people can engage with kind of a low threshold and no tech or old-fashioned tech. Thank you so much, John. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I know we have time constraints for Omar as well.
No problem. And sorry for going over. Thank you for having me.
Thanks, John.
All
Omar,
right,
thank you.
everyone. Thank you for inviting me. I'm going to go ahead and do a quick screen share. So give me one moment. All right, can everyone see my screen? All right. So my name is Omar Cuevas Vega. I'm the Policy and Field Coordinator for Statewide Poverty Action Network. We're a statewide advocacy organization that organizes around racial and economic justice issues. I will be covering 2 out of our 4 policy campaigns, but I'll be sharing all my materials out, so you can definitely check out and see some of our other priorities that we have. I'm also joined by my colleague, Karina, who's probably in the chat. She'll be posting some of the links that I'll be sharing throughout this presentation. All right, so to set the stage for our 2021 policy priority, we as a staff came together at the start of the pandemic and sort of took a stock and lay of the land. And, we surveyed our members through social media, phone calls, text messages, and talked to community partners. And these are the 3 things that we decided were going to be part of our focus as we went into legislative session, both, right now during the interim, going into 2021 and beyond. So the first one was fighting for what's right. And that's, continuing to uplift and support community members, low-income community members around Washington State, who even before the pandemic were already struggling, and now during the pandemic are the ones who are being hit the hardest. So we want to make sure that we are pushing for progressive policies that will not only support them through this pandemic, but even in the economic downturn that we're expecting after the pandemic. Similarly, we want to continue to uphold community member stories and continue to share them, change the narrative and put faces and names to the struggles that people are experiencing now. And then lastly, we want to make sure that we are continuing to build community. We know that because of COVID, we've been limited in how we can engage with folks. Everything has gone virtual. So we want to make sure that we are still engaging with our community, even if we're not face to face. So, getting a little creative about it and making sure that we're still in contact, whether that's through some of these like virtual meetings or phone calls and texting and things like that, and social media. So these are the three things that we wanted to make sure that we're holding in our mind as we are going into legislative session. As I mentioned, we do have 6 campaigns that we will be working on during the 2021 legislative session. I will only be talking about the first 2, but the rest of the presentation which you'll receive covers our other 4 priorities. So the first one is all around our safety net programs, our safety net that we have here in the state of Washington. And then our second one is expanding access to dental care. So for our safety net programs, I'll definitely be talking about temporary assistance for needy families, housing and essential needs, and the age blind and disabled program. So particularly for the temporary assistance for needy families, as John mentioned, these programs are on the chopping block. So we want to make sure that we're protecting and maintaining current investments so that the families who need to access these services are not completely cut off, especially right now during the pandemic. Oops, sorry about that. So that's the first one, is that we want to protect current investments. We also want to make sure that we extend relief measures that have been implemented during the pandemic. So some of the exceptions that were put in place by DSHS at the beginning of the pandemic were to suspend the work first sanction process, to exempt the work first participation, to expand desk-side and telephone work first orientations rather than making them in person, and then to continue payments for work first work study. So we want to make sure that the state continues to utilize those extensions throughout the rest of the pandemic and even beyond. And then the last one related to that is that we want to make sure that the state implements some of the policies that we passed this past legislative session. They are considering delaying implementation of some of the bills that we passed in 2020, which I'll cover in just a little bit. And they're thinking of delaying it. And we know that these are crucial policies that would support families who are experiencing economic crisis at the moment. So some of those are the 2 months grace period to cure their sanction status. So that was something that we passed. It wasn't as robust as we had hoped, but 2 months is better than nothing. So they have a 2-month period to get back into compliance without losing their full grant. The second one is around time limit extensions for families experiencing homelessness, even if they reach their 16-month time limit. Unfortunately, the state decided to go with a very narrow definition, and we're hoping that they can utilize the McKinney-Vento definition of homelessness. And then lastly is the child support pass-through. So we were able to ensure that families who are receiving TANF are able to receive a portion of their child support. I believe it's $50 for one child and $100 for 2 children or more. We know that's not enough, but it's definitely a great start. So we want to make sure that the state doesn't delay implementation of some of these bills. Moving into our housing and essential needs and age blind and disabled program, as John mentioned, we want to make sure that no cuts are made to either of those 2 programs. We were able to put in some really good investments this past legislative session, and we want to make sure that the state doesn't cut them to ensure that they have access to these programs as we're navigating this pandemic. Moving into access to dental care, we have two priorities. The first one is to maintain current levels of funding for the Medicaid adult dental program. That's currently a add-on program that the state is offering. And so in times like these, when the state has to balance the budget, it's easily one of the easier programs to cut. And we know that for a lot of folks, health begins in the mouth. And so without access to adult dental, they aren't able to go for some of those preventive services that we know, if left untreated later down the line, could get much, much worse. Our second priority is about expanding dental therapy across Washington State. I know that I've spoken to folks about this in the past to this group, but I definitely want to reiterate. A dental therapist is a mid-level dental care professional. Think of them as a nurse practitioner or a physician's assistant in the dental world. They are able to do some of the procedures that a hygienist or an assistant and even a dentist can do under the supervision of a licensed dentist. And one of the great things about this program is it's currently already being practiced on tribal lands across Washington State, and we want to make sure that everybody in Washington State has access to this, because one of the goals of the program is to recruit folks from the community who are from the same culture, share the same language, share the same values, who look like you, talk like you, and can provide these services, which people are more likely to adhere to these services. We do currently have a petition that we're circulating around in regards to dental therapy, which my colleague Karina will drop into the chat. If you have not filled it out, please do so. Feel free to share that with friends, neighbors, program participants, clients, what have you. Please share it out. We're trying to reach a goal of 2,000 by the end of the year. So please share it out. So those are the last priorities I will cover, but I will make a quick plug. There's a link. I'm just going to skip over these priorities. I do want to invite folks to join us for our virtual lobby day on January 18th, 2021. It is going to be virtual, but we are working our hardest to ensure that technology and Wi-Fi is not a barrier to participation. Registration has opened up, and please share out the link with, once again, your friends, neighbors, yourself, program participants, and clients. If you register by January 4th, you'll receive an advocacy toolbox in the mail, which has fun and interactive advocacy activities that you can utilize throughout the day and throughout the week of January 18th. To get more involved, feel free to give us a follow on social media. Those are our social media handles. And also to stay alert to all our news, sign up for our newsletter. We send timely advocacy asks throughout session and ways to get involved. So feel free to sign up for our newsletter. And if you have any questions, comments, want to get more involved, want to have people that want to share a story, feel free to have them email myself or my colleague Karina. And yeah, I look forward to working with all of you throughout legislative session. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to present again to the coalition. Thank you.
Omar and Karina, thank you so very much. What a wealth of information. I have to say, it is inspiring to see the thoughtful and essential priorities that Poverty Action members have helped to develop, and that the Housing Alliance members have helped to develop. And we are excited to partner with both of these terrific statewide advocacy organizations to press forward on these really life-saving and necessary measures. I'm so sorry that we are doing our usual rushing through, but I want to remind everyone, including our presenters, that this is just the beginning. However, we are moving forward because we are so extraordinarily fortunate, thanks to Zoom, that our state lawmakers are able to pop in to our meetings. And we are joined both now by Senator Patty Kuderer from the 48th Legislative District over on the east side of our county, and by State Representative Nicole Macri from the Fightin' 43rd District. And I am really just incredibly appreciative to both of you. We know that you have caucus meetings and many other things, although the session hasn't formally begun, that you are working very hard in your official elected capacity already. So without further ado, I'm going to welcome and invite Senator Kuderer to speak for 5 or 7 minutes about some of the key legislative priorities and bills that she is working on, and take a couple of questions. And then she has an earlier hard stop than Representative Macri, but we will ask you, Representative Macri, to do the same. And of course, thank you both so much for adding this to your morning's agenda. Senator Kuderer, we had the opportunity, of course, to hear from our Washington Voting Rights Restoration Coalition colleagues about that wonderful and important act that you have helped to champion for 2 years in a row now. And we got a little bit of a taste about some tenant protection legislation, but please feel free to share your perspective and highlights, things that you want us as advocates to be attending to.
Sure. Thank you, Allison. It's good to see you again. And thanks to everyone who's on the call. I just want to give a shout out to my colleague, Representative Macri. We have been working diligently, actually before last session ended, on what we knew was going to be an emergency housing situation involving renters and landlords. So just know that the work did not end last session. We have been at it all interim. So I am the chair of the newly named Housing and Local Government Committee. The last couple of years, it was called Housing Stability and Affordability. And we created that committee to underscore the importance of housing in our state, and that housing is an essential need and so critical for pretty much every aspect of your life. Most notably for me, mental and physical health and opportunity for employment. So with that as a background, we have been making a lot of progress in the area of housing over the last few years. This year, because of the pandemic, we have seen that there is the potential for a looming eviction crisis. Right now, we have over 150,000 families who are behind in rent. And the governor's eviction moratorium expires at the end of this month. We have been in conversations with him, and the hope is that he will extend that into next session to give us time to work on legislation to address this issue from a policy standpoint. And we have been not just working with the governor's office, we've been involving many, many stakeholders, landlord advocates, tenant advocates, nonprofits, commerce that deals with emergency rental assistance program right now, and the courts, because eviction is a court process. So the goal here is to get to a process that will streamline the eviction process to the point where it will actually slow it down, I should say. We want to slow it down in order to resolve as many tenancy issues as we can through mediation. That is the overall 10,000-foot level goal of what the legislation wants to do. We are also working on ways of increasing resources for emergency rental assistance. And there are some bills that we're looking at to do that. But quite frankly, the need is enormous. It is about $100 million a month that we are going to need. And while our state was in really good shape going into this pandemic, and before we left Olympia last session, we did pass a $200 million coronavirus relief bill, which also helped. We have a very healthy rainy day fund, but the reality is we don't have enough with the resources that we have in order to make up for the rent shortfall for every single household. So we are going to need federal assistance, and we are hoping that that will happen, but we can't bank on it. So if it doesn't happen, we're all going to have to compromise, and that's just the reality of it. We're looking at a way of having reasonable repayment plans based on the tenant's income and for a reasonable set of time in order to not have them rent burdened as they go forward in some cases. And there could be, combined with that, there could be some emergency rental assistance to help alleviate a lot of the pressure. So those are really the permutations that we're looking at: a mandatory mediation program that will encourage and facilitate communication between landlords and tenants and hopefully resolve the issue so that it doesn't have to get into court. And also, if it does get into court, we are looking at ensuring avenues for tenants to have access to legal representation, because we know that the outcomes are better for tenants when that happens. So in terms of what you can do, you know, your voice is really needed to be heard. You know, the reason the landlord-tenant laws were the way they were, first and foremost, they were drafted by landlord attorneys. That's the power that they had 40 years ago. I don't know that that power has changed all that much, but you had the political will to make the changes to the RLTA that we made a couple of years ago that were really hard fought, I'm just going to say. And this next round is not going to be any easier. And so it's really important to hear from all of you and to hear from constituents who have stories to tell, and to reach out to your own legislators, always respectfully, always constructively. If you don't like something, propose a solution. You know, what's an alternative that you think would work is always the best way to grab someone's attention. And that's true in all professions, not just as a politician. So I have really appreciated, you know, hearing from folks in your organization, and you know, the stories are valuable, very, very valuable, and they're very helpful in how we craft policies. And quite frankly, I heard from someone today on the landlord side who did exactly what I just said. He laid out a situation that was in a very respectful way that really required me to take a second look at the suspension of the 20-day no cause. Not that we're still going to suspend it, but there's going to be an exception for shared housing situations that involve domestic violence and things like that, so that we don't have people living together where there is potential for physical harm. And I think that's a reasonable exception to have to that. But in order for the mediation process to work, we have to at least temporarily suspend the 20-day no cause notice. And that's only if we don't get Representative Macri's bill across the finish line, and I will let her speak to that. So I'm not going to steal her thunder. But if there are any questions, I'm happy to field them before I have to jump off.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Senator Kuderer. While we wait to see if there are some questions, potentially even from some of your constituents in the chat, I will ask you what we are asking many lawmakers and their aides, which is, given the virtual nature of the session to come, what is your preference for how your constituents and advocates who care about the issues that your committee will be considering, what's your preference for how we communicate with you in this virtual environment?
Yeah, thanks for that. Email.
Okay.
That is the best way. If you do need to speak with me, we can arrange for a Zoom meeting. But you're right. I mean, this virtual session is going to pose its challenges. And we are expecting maybe 25 to 50% of the normal bill volume to go through the system. And, you know, every session has its unpredictability. And this one definitely has added challenges built in because of the technology and issues that are associated with that. So just know that that this year we're going to be looking at top priority bills that relate to COVID relief, and this definitely falls into that category. The bill I just discussed, and there are other housing bills that we're looking at too. I just gave you the number one that I've been working on. Yeah, and if you want a rundown of what those are, I'm happy to give them to you. Just shoot me an email and I'll run down the list. So
wonderful.
But, yeah, that's really what we're looking at. It's going to be difficult. So send me an email.
Yeah, thank you. We will do that, and maybe we can work with your staff to schedule a small Zoom for your constituents with a particular interest in COVID relief and housing and tenant protection bills, so that we have that on the books and take advantage of the fact that we can maybe schedule that in anticipation of the fact that we won't be able to squeeze into your office space in Olympia.
Absolutely. And just so you know, that does open up the possibility of meetings after 5 o'clock too.
We love to hear that. Thank you very much, especially in terms of including people who might be in an overnight only shelter situation. That's really important. Thank you so much for your leadership, for your consistent pressure on these issues, and for working very hard throughout the interim, which is not really an interim in COVID in particular. I think that we may indeed have questions for you. I know you have a hard stop at 10:25, and I know Representative Macri has a hard stop too, so I do want to make a little time for Representative Macri to share some of the legislation that she is working on and championing. And especially if there's anyone who is in the 48th district, please feel free to drop a question for Senator Kuderer into the chat. Thank you, and welcome, Rep. Macri.
Hi, thank you. And thank you, Senator Kuderer. It's just, I have to say, it's really just such a great privilege to be able to work with Senator Kuderer on these issues. We have a lot of alignment and a shared sense of urgency around these issues, and to have that bicameral, that House-Senate partnership is really, really important in a regular year, and this year especially, because it is going to be a very difficult year to get work done when we're not able to be in person. And so I'm just really grateful for that. And I think everything Senator Kuderer said is spot on. It's going to be a difficult session, but we're pushing hard. These issues are going to be quite contentious. We've seen that throughout the pandemic, and obviously before then, landlord-tenant issues can be quite challenging. I'll talk a little bit about, from the House perspective, a little bit from my perspective, because there's been some changes in the House. And want you all to be aware that we have established actually a brand new committee, the Housing, Human Services, and Veterans Committee in the House. And Representative Strom Peterson from Snohomish County is chairing that committee. And he is a great, a strong partner to me in many of these issues. So I think he'll be a strong leader there. We have two really strong members from King County who are serving, or three members who are serving on that committee. One is the vice chair, who's a new member, Jamila Taylor. And some of you may know Jamila because she works at the Public Defenders Association in addition to her serving in the legislature. And Representative Frank Chop, probably a familiar name to people in this group, my seatmate and a longtime champion in housing and homelessness issues, and Representative Meelan Tai from the 41st District in East King County, and she has been an enormous champion on landlord-tenant issues, on homeless issues. She did a lot of work on the Homeless Bill of Rights bill last year, along with Representative Gregerson. And so we will be well represented on that committee. And I'm looking forward to working with all of those folks and the rest of the committee. I have taken on a new role this session as one of the vice chairs on the Appropriations Committee. So as a member of the budget team, we've already gone to work, and I want to mention to you that we are working on an early recovery package that we are hoping to push through the legislature early in session. We know Washingtonians can't wait until late in the spring to see additional relief. I mean, we're all waiting to see if Congress can do their job. But regardless of that, as Senator Kuderer, some people have some comment on that ability already. Regardless of that, we know the state is going to have to do something. The feds are not going to come through for us on all the things we need. And some of the things that I know you've already talked about this morning are on that list. House members in particular are pushing, well, House and Senate members both are pushing on rent assistance, utility assistance, unemployment benefits for folks who otherwise would not be eligible under federal rules, and TANF. Several of us are pushing for around a lot of the TANF issues that Omar went over. You know, it is vitally important that people just have cash money to pay their bills. People who are working, people who are out of work, people who are disabled, not likely to get back to work soon. So we're pushing on that for a short-term recovery. we are looking to protect those investments we did last year on homelessness and affordable housing. And I know that's a big priority for you all. And I want to just underscore what Senator Kuderer said about reaching out to us. We do read your emails. We get inundated with email, but we do read them. And personal emails, we're more likely to read. You don't have to put a lot of time into them, but if you send it yourself versus clicking a button, or if you just like change the title from action alert, it's more likely to get our attention. So that is all helpful. I just actually want to give a shout out to Maya, who's on this call, just as evidence. Omar presented on dental therapy. I already got an email from her on dental therapy as we're sitting in this meeting. And so we do read the emails, they make a difference. Setting up quick Zoom meetings. We're trying to set up virtual offices for those of you who have visited in Olympia. It's these quick 15-minute meetings. Usually you just sort of rush into your lawmaker's office, share, what's most helpful is to share your personal stories, either as a service provider or as someone who is or has been housing unstable. Those real stories are the stories that we can bring forward in conversations. And so that is what I find really most valuable. So I'll underscore that. Bills I'm working on that I think would be a particular importance to you all. One is on eliminating no-cause evictions statewide. I am hearing from renters and from tenant advocates across the state that this is essential, that once the eviction moratorium lifts, the ability for landlords to issue 20-day no-cause notices is something that is of great concern to folks. So getting rid of no-cause notices and allowing tenancies just only to terminate when there are legitimate business reasons for them to be terminated is what we're working toward. We worked hard on that bill last year. Many of you were there with me on that, and we're going to continue to push through. I think COVID has demonstrated to us the importance of a policy like that. I'm also working on a progressive revenue, a tax bill. The coalition was a huge partner last year on the King County option for an employer compensation or corporate payroll tax for companies that have high earners, people earning over $150,000. And we're bringing that back as a state bill. This is very similar to the Jumpstart bill that passed ordinance that is in effect in Seattle. And so we'll be pushing hard on that because, as Senator Kuderer mentioned, we're going to need revenue options on the table because although the revenue outlook looks slightly better than the abysmal $9 billion shortfall we saw over the summer, there is still a shortfall. And we know we have to do quick economic recovery right out of the gate. And while we do have money in the rainy day fund, it's not going to be enough to do all things. So I would appreciate your continued support, not only on the protecting the investments that we have made, but on making sure that we have revenue that is progressive and that looks to ask those who are doing well to contribute. And those are large companies that are able to pay people higher salaries. So those are some things I'm working on. I have to run, of course, to go to another meeting. I just want to say, outside the legislature, I've been working almost full time at GESC. And so I can tell you this just from what I know, the work that you all are doing is invaluable. You know better than me. I can't even describe, none of us thought we would be in this place. Is literally life-saving work. It always has been, but the experience this year has underscored that more than ever. So I'm just so deeply, deeply grateful that you show up every single day to do this work, that at times you're putting yourself and your families at risk in order to help other people. And you are keeping so many people safe, and we're keeping workers in homeless services safe because we are doing it well. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And your information about what's happening on the ground when people like me can't get out into community as we normally would, we're all kind of in our own little bubbles here, our Zoom life. So sharing your experience out there in the world and sharing the experience of people who are currently homeless is something that's really, really important. The reason why we have $200 million in the coronavirus relief fund from the state is because you all were calling me the end of session, telling me how bad things were. And I was able, with many other people, to push that narrative and make sure that legislators understood what was happening back at home. So I really appreciate the partnership on that stuff. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Representative Macri. We know that we could not have a more powerful, dedicated champion for people experiencing homelessness to have homes and health than you. And we know how extraordinarily hard you have been working to do your job as a legislator and your job at DESC. So thank you so much for joining us. We will be in touch with you. You heard what she said. Send those emails and change the subject line or the first sentence. Thank you very much. I want to just recognize that we are, of course, not going to do our coalition year in review, except you could sort of press a fast forward from what Representative Macri just said. The first week in March, which is known in the coalition as the week that the coronavirus got really real, was the last week of the 2020 legislative session. And our coalition was part of sending a letter with 300 sign-on organizations to Representative Macri to share with Governor Inslee to get that emergency first round of COVID relief in place before we all went into lockdown. So our work continues. I want to say a brief note just about the point in time count information that I shared at the beginning of the meeting. We support the work that King County did to request a waiver for the 2021 point in time count. It is not the right focus, to be honest with you, when we are trying to keep people alive and get people into shelter and prevent the spread of COVID-19, to try to also carry out an unsheltered count. That doesn't mean that we don't care deeply about documenting, bearing witness to, and using every ounce of our strength to respond to the needs of people who are left outside after our shelters and transitional housing and housing are full. It does mean that we all have our work cut out for us, of course. As Jason texted me, we definitely needed to put our year in review portion of the agenda on hold. So I think what we'll invite you all to do is, if you have a thought from a high point or a low point, I guess, of the year in review, whether it's related to the coalition or other parts of your life, and you want to share that in the chat, as we move through the next half hour, that would be great. I think Jason, Sasha, and Saleena and I are working to do a little visual year in review on Facebook. And so we'll invite you to reflect with us on the fact that despite a terrible pandemic year, collectively, our advocacy brought two enormous opportunities to reality. Both the Jumpstart Seattle legislation, which is going to bring in over $200 million a year, that's already doing good to help small businesses and immigrant and refugee communities and support basic services in Seattle, and the health through housing legislation in King County, which we are pressing very hard to make sure houses 1,200 or more people experiencing chronic homelessness through the purchase and transformation of hotels, motels, nursing homes, and other empty buildings. That's over $500 million a year more in resources for our communities. It's not adequate, but it sure is a hell of a lot better than we thought we were going to be able to do. And that's not to ignore the pain, the grief, and the upheaval of the last 10 months at all. But that's why I'm gonna hand things over to Jason so that he can welcome Reggie, and we can also take some solace in each other's company, as well as in the true power of music. So thank you all for joining us and for sticking around if you're able to.
Thank you, Allison. That was a lovely summary. And again, we will be doing a more robust interview through our communication platforms. So be on the lookout for that. We want to end this meeting and sort of, I guess, end our year with you in a way with the gift of music. In these times where we feel increasingly isolated and disconnected from each other, opportunities to connect through art and music is an opportunity that we want to lift up and uphold in our community. We're really fortunate this morning to be joined by Reggie Garrett, Seattle folk musician, who is going to tell us a little bit about the music that he's been creating post-pandemic, and then share some of his art with us. Reggie, thank you so much for joining us. Do you want to say a little bit about what you've been working on, and then show us what you have in store?
Okay, well, thanks for inviting me. Before I do anything, I'd like to find out, does it sound okay? How does it sound?
It's a little quiet on your end.
Okay. Let me turn up. Is that better? All right. I'm going to do this, and when I get started, I'm going to take these headphones off because they are not helpful when I get the feedback loops them. I've been doing this for probably longer than most of you have been alive. Actually, that's not true, but a long, long time. I write all kinds of music. The best way anybody ever described it was urban acoustic folk soul, which, I have no idea what that means, but it kind of sounds like what I try to do. And it's a blend of just about everything I like. I've always had difficulty over the years, people trying to classify me. Because people say that I'm blues, but blues people say, no, it's not. People, it's jazz. Jazz people, no, it's, it has everything in it, everything that I like. I'm going to do a bunch of songs. Before I get started, I will warn you that I tend to love sad, mournful, pitiful music. So, I hope that none of you there are no razor blades around, no open windows and empty ledges. Just sit yourselves down, get comfortable, get a nice warm beverage, and I'll get started. And like I said, I'm going to take these things off. If anybody would like to get my attention while I'm performing, start screaming, yelling, waving, because I won't be able to hear you through these things. Ruby does as Ruby will, enchanted eye, don't ask her why. Ruby knows as Ruby feels, face to the sky, she's ready to fly. Sailing with angels, she's sailing with angels, so high she's gonna fly away. Ruby sails the moonish sea. Show me your garden and all your mystery. Ruby's touch, a two-way street. Anything is possible, Mom, but nothing's for free. Sailing with angels, she's sailing with angels, so high she's gonna fly away. Ruby showed me how to live. She whirls in the sun, or smile like bliss. She says life is rarely what you want. Just fall in love with what it is. Sailing with angels. She's sailing with angels. So high, she's gonna fly away. Sailing with angels. She's sailing with angels. So high, she's gonna fly away. Gotta go home. Okay, so real quick, is the sound okay? Balance level? All right, I'm on it. I'm gonna do this one. It's a song I wrote a while back about things that still happen way too often in this society. Read a book by Ta-Nehisi Coates years back, actually a few years back, and when I read it, it just struck me, and I sat down and wrote this song. And actually did it for Seattle Arts and Lectures. They decided not to have it performed during their speech, their talk by Ta-Nehisi Coates. But it didn't much matter. The book just spoke to me, and I wrote this, and it's out. And I've just decided I'm going to try to play it every chance I get. It's called So Far Away. In his hand, he flashed a gun. Oh, could it be you only thought you saw one? I can't believe that you shot him down so easily. Just trying to make his way back home, so far away, so far away. And so now you see a threat in her dark-skinned teenage silhouette. I can't believe that you slammed her down so easily. Just trying to make her way back home, so far away, so far away. Well, nobody told me that my life would be this way. I stepped through that door and I got hell and the devil to pay. I can't believe that you took their lives so easily. and you don't know just who I am, and you never really gave a damn. Still, I can't believe that you shot me dead so easily. So now my song fades so far away, so far away. Just trying to make our way back home, so far away, so far away. Not a whole lot of really happy songs that I do. There's not very many love songs I've ever written in my life. It's always been a really difficult thing for me to do. This is one of the very few, So it's a rare thing. Treasure it. Doesn't happen too often. Probably won't see one again for decades. When she gets a taste for me, she waits for me, relates to me. Every little thing that she feels to be just ought to be. Her words float round my heart like a symphony, and I'm so high I could fly. And every time she sees me, she teases me, pleases me, knows all the things that appeal to me, reveal to me all the soft hues of the love that she feels. I'm so high I could fly. Well, I've got no need for four-leaf clovers, tip sheets for lovers and fools. I don't care if no other approves her. I'm in love through and through. When I need a lift, she calls for me, falls for me, and every chance she gets, she embraces me, graces me. With this love I will never replace. I'm so high I could fly. You know, there once was a time that you came for me and claimed me, said just the words that spoke to me, awoke me on to this love time will never revoke. And I'm so high I could fly. Well, I've got no need for four-leaf clovers, tip sheets for lovers and fools. I don't care if no other approves her. I'm in love through and through. No, I've got no need for four-leaf clovers, tip sheets for lovers and fools. I don't care if no other approves her. I'm in love through and through. Well, I've got no need for four-leaf clovers, cheap seats for lovers and fools. I don't care if no other approves her. I'm in love through and through. So now back to the serious part of this thing. One of my favorite songs I've ever written. I just love playing this thing. It's called Remember Me. In time, you won't remember. Just forget all those things we said. There'll come a day, it just won't matter anymore. Just roll on, one in a million, to a brand new certainty. And every night, pause for a moment, remember me. In time, we'll be forsaken, a kind of blue in this lonely room. One chilly night, our flame will flicker in the wake of a memory. And where were you that cold, cold night when it all came down? Yes, where were you? Oh, when we fell so hard out of love. Don't wanna go down that long twisting road anymore. Don't wanna hang my heart out in a world without your love. Don't wanna go down that long twisting road anymore. Don't wanna hang my heart out in a world without your love. time you love another for your own reasons, I'll never know. Caught in the whirlwind of the moment, you'll fall again. Just roll on, one in a million, to a brand new uncertainty. And every night, pause for a moment, remember me. Yes, every night, pause for a moment, remember me. I'm looking at the clock and I see that I don't have a whole lot of time left, so time for maybe one more song. I was trying to think what to do. It's a song that over the years, I've sung at Christmas around this time of the year and don't get much chance to do it through the rest of the year, and I haven't recently, but I figure I'm going to try to resurrect it for this one. How many of you, let me actually put this thing on so I can pee people. How many of you have ever heard Christmas in the Trenches by John McCutcheon? A couple of people have. It's a song that I love. My wife loved this song, this album, and made me learn it. And so I've tried to sing it every year. So I'll finish with this one. It's John McCutcheon's, my version, Christmas in the Trenches. My name is Francis Tolliver. I come from Liverpool. 2 years ago, the war was waiting for me after school. To Belgium and to Flanders, to Germany to here. I fought for king and country I love dear. It was Christmas in the trenches where the frost so bitter hung. The frozen fields of France were still, no Christmas song was sung. Our families back in England were toasting us that day. Their brave and glorious lads so far away. I was lying with my messmate on the cold and rocky ground when across the lines of battle came a most peculiar sound. Says I, now listen up, me boys, each soldier strained to hear, as one young German voice sang out so clear. Ah, he's singing bloody well, you know, my partner says to me. Soon, one by one, each German voice joined in harmony. Our truce flame stood silent, and the gas clouds rolled no more, as Christmas brought us respite from the war. As soon as they had finished, and a reverent pause was spent, God rest ye merry gentlemen, struck up some lads from Kent. The next they sang was Stille Nacht, 'tis silent night, says I. into tongues, one song filled up that sky. There's someone coming towards us, the frontline center cried. All sights were fixed on one lone figure, trudging from their side. His truce flag like a Christmas star shone on that plain so bright, as he bravely strode unarmed into the night. Soon one by one on either side walked into no man's land. With neither gun nor bayonet, we met there hand to hand. We shared some secret brandy, and we wished each other well. And in a flare-lit soccer game, we gave them hell. Oh, we traded chocolate cigarettes and photographs from home. These sons and fathers far away from families of their own. Young Sanders played his squeeze box, and they had a violin. This curious and unlikely band of men. Soon daylight was upon us, and France was France once more. With sad farewells, we each prepared to settle back to war. But the question haunted every heart that lived that wondrous night: whose family have I fixed within my sights? It was Christmas in the trenches, where the frost so bitter hung. The frozen fields of France were warmed as songs of peace were sung. For the walls they'd kept between us to exact the work of war had crumbled and were gone forevermore. My name is Francis Tolliver. In Liverpool I dwell. Each Christmas comes since World War I. I've learned its lessons well. That the ones who call the shots won't be among the dead and lame. And on each end of the rifle we're the same. Now I can hear you. So what a lot of people really don't know is that that's a true story. During World War I, all up and down the Western Front, German, French, British soldiers had a truce on Christmas Eve and got together, and things were kind of never the same after that. A lot of soldiers on both sides were court-martialed for fraternizing with the enemy. And from that point on, there were lots and lots of strikes, general strikes and mutinies throughout the war. So that's just something I like to play every time, this time of year, to sort of remind us what it's all about. And thanks.
Reggie, we can't thank you enough. We have to thank your wife for making you learn the John McCutcheon song, and thank you for being so gracious, so powerful, so generous with your gifts. I want to let folks know that there's at least one CD, I think more than one, and we can facilitate folks getting their hands on them if they would like to do that. You've been so gracious to the coalition over the years, donating your time and that of your colleagues and fundraising concerts. And we're going to share the comments that people put in the chat while you were playing with you, because you touched a lot of people's hearts today. And this was really extremely beautiful and powerful, and people are deeply grateful for what you just gave us.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
Thank you. We hope that you and your family are staying healthy and safe, and that maybe we can join together virtually before we join together in person, which we also look forward to soon.
One of these days.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thanks to everybody who joined us and stuck around. We might need to ask your permission, Reggie, to share some of this, because I think people who weren't able to stay might really appreciate it. So maybe we'll talk to you about the appropriate way, if there is one.
Oh, you're welcome to. Not a problem.
Thank you.
Spread it out there.
All right. Thank you so much. Coalition team, thank you. We need to reconnect later, since several of us have meetings that we're going to head off to now virtually, but boy, are you getting a lot of appreciation and kudos. And someone also said that you just inspired them to play as well. So thank you. Thank you very much. And I'll let you close out if there are some last minute things to do, and I'm going to excuse myself with deep appreciation. Thank you.
Thanks. Let's see.
Thank you everyone so much for supporting us through this wild roller coaster of a year. The work continues in the next year. Our next coalition membership meeting is going to be on Thursday, January the 21st, again from 9 a.m. to 10:30 a.m. The picture in Olympia is going to be a little bit more clear by that meeting, so we'll have some more details about exactly how to engage in virtual lobbying opportunities, creative ideas to get staff, residents, guests, and clients of your program engaged in the process, and information and resources as always. Thank you all so much for being here. You will receive a follow-up email within the next day or two that will include both a recording of this meeting as well as a summary of all the resources contained within. We encourage you to share that information with folks in your network who may not have been able to attend today. On the behalf of myself, Saleena, Sasha, Allison, Aileen, and everyone in our lives that have supported us through this insane time, thank you so much, and see you all soon.